To mount your rack, you will need the following tools. You're going to need a drill. You're going to need a 7/32 inch hex wrench, a 7/16 inch drill bit, or step drill bit with a 7/16 inch increment. You're going to need an 1/8 inch or close to an 1/8 inch small drill bit for a pilot hole. You're going to need a 9/16 inch socket with an extension, or a deep socket will also work. You're going to be able to use a 9/16 wrench as an option if you don't have a socket, and I'll explain that later. You can also use a pen. The sharper the pen, the better, and a roll of masking tape. Your single mount rack is going to come with the single mount that you'll be mounting to your truck pre-installed. So the first thing you need to do is take it off. Very simply take off this bolt with your 9/16 ratchet. The opposite side is locked in, so as long as you keep the other side pushed into its hole, there's no need for a tool on the other side. And remove the bolt. There will be 2 inserts in your rack. These just can stay in, and these are simply just to fill up the empty space for the bolt to go through. The ideal location to mount your single mount is about somewhere in the range of 16 to 19 inches. The lower you mount the rack, the more the rack needs to come up to meet the tire. So it works either way, but ideally an ideal position would be about 18-19 inches, but 16 inches is definitely is okay as well. So in this case, we're in a Ford F-150. It is a 2016 model, and the pre-existing holes here sit at about 19 inches. But I think I'm going to mount these the single mount here at about 17 inches. So the location that it's being mounted, 17 inches, means right where the holes are going to be drilled. So in the center of this bracket will be 17 inches. So the most important decision to make is exactly where you want to mount your single mount. In this case, we're going to be drilling holes through the front of the bed, and so they need to be in exactly the right position so that we don't have to drill 2 times. That's what the tape is for. So in my truck, I have a line right here that will make it easier for me to make it parallel. If you need to do some measuring to get it parallel, but whatever you do, this bracket needs to be parallel with the bed of your truck. So in this case, we'll just go ahead and throw some tape down right across the center line of where I want to drill my holes. This truck has a rough texture, so you got to work that tape into it so that it doesn't fall off. You want that tape on there really good, because this is what you're going to use to mark your holes for where you're going to drill, so you don't want it moving around on you at all. So before you mount your rack or start drilling holes into your truck, bring your rack into the truck. You know, you really want to get it probably over to one side as much as you can so that you free up your truck bed with as much space for other cargo and things that you might put in it. So what you need to consider is the handle here. And when you close the handle, is it going to touch the wheel well of your truck? In this case, once I mount this up here to my about 17-inch height that I've got it estimated that I'm going to drill, it looks like the handle's not going to interfere with the wheel well. So just make sure that you bring it in your truck and do some investigating, make sure everything is where you want it, and then you only have to drill once. Okay, now I roughly know where I want to mount the rack. So I've marked on both sides of the mount here so that I can just bring it back. Okay, I like my parallel line I have here. I've set 3 pieces of tape aside that I'm going to use to hold this in place so that I can mark for my drilling. So I'm going to align this edge with my parallel edge of the tape line here, hold it in place, and then I'm going to go ahead and lay some tape down to hold this bracket right where I want it. Okay. It's a little bit tricky with this truck bed because it has kind of a textured liner in it and the tape doesn't like to stick. So if you have that, just keep double checking, make sure everything stays parallel. This is just a temporary holder, placeholder. Put a little bit of pressure on it, double check it. Once you feel like everything is good, then go ahead and take your pen and mark your holes for drilling. Okay, you're going to mark the holes right through where the bolts go. Okay, you've got 2 holes. Double check those holes. Make sure your marks are in the middle, that they haven't cheated off to the sides or anything. But get a good look at it. Make sure that they're in the center of each hole that's pre-drilled into the bracket. Okay, now you're ready to pull this apart and start drilling your holes. The first thing we want to do is we want to drill a small hole in the center of each one of these marks. So we're going to take the 1/8 inch drill bit, and I suggest you take a drill bit and push it back into your drill. Consider the depth of your cab, from your cab to your bed. Make sure that the depth that the drill bit isn't deeper than that, because you don't want to push through it and hit your cab. So I've pulled it back. I've got plenty of room here. It's not going to hit the cab. Another very important thing to check for before you start to drill anything is check behind your cab, between your bed and your cab. Make sure there's nothing running back there. I'm not aware of too many things that might be back there, but different vehicles could have different elements. Make sure you don't have, you can usually see back in here a little bit. For sure you can put your hand back there and feel. Just make sure you don't have any components back there that would be a problem if you drilled into. In this case, my truck has nothing back there, and so I'm free and clear. I just want to make sure that my drill bit doesn't hit my cab. So whenever you go and drill holes that are going to need to be right on center, it's good to punch a little dent in there for your drill bit to follow. So I'm going to use a center punch in this case. Center punch is going to give you a sharp point. You're just going to put that right in the middle of the hole and then bang it in there, give yourself a nice dent. Now if you don't have one of these, you might be able to use a nail. A nail can give you a little dent that would give you that same spot that you can drill into. So I'm going to go ahead and use the center punch here. Okay, I've got my holes marked. I've got my holes center punched with a dent to line up my drill bit, and I'm going to go ahead and drill it with the 1/8 inch drill bit. Okay, the next step is going to be drilling your larger hole. So we're drilling a 7/16 inch hole, and if you have a long drill bit like this, the danger of using a drill bit like this is as you're drilling that hole, it can catch and pull itself through, and then you run it all the way to the cab and possibly dent your cab, or even drill through it if you're not careful. So they make a collar like this. This is something you can get at Harbor Freight, and you can put a collar on your drill bit, and it'll basically limit how deep it can go. You're only going to need about a 1/4 inch depth to get through most bed thickness. So you would just set your collar to that thickness. Okay, what I like to use is a step drill bit like this. This type of drill bit is less likely, really it's not likely to drive itself through because it doesn't have the spiral of a normal drill bit. So you just have to make sure that you know where to stop. So this particular one is also just a Harbor Freight drill bit, just a few bucks, and it's marked with all the different increments. So these are really handy little tools to get. Again, I think they're about, I don't know, somewhere between $5 and $10 to buy one of these drill bits, and that's what I'm going to use for this project. And I've marked it with a red pen. You can see a bit of a mark there, right there, and that's where I'm going to stop. So let's go ahead and get that going. Another nice thing about this drill bit is it's not going to go all the way to my cab. It's a much shorter drill bit, but let's go ahead and get it going here. Turn that drill down. You can feel it step each hole that it drills. You can feel it pop in. You'll just want to stop when it gets to the mark that you put on it. Okay, we should have two nice holes there. Let's go ahead and pull our tape off and look at our amazing handiwork here. Now, if you're not comfortable with drilling holes in your truck bed and you're worried about maybe you're going to damage something, I would recommend just go down to your local body shop. They should be able to help you drill a couple holes like this and get you set up. They'll know how to do it. All right, just a quick way to test your holes. Make sure that you've drilled them in the right position and that this is going to align. Is just to put your screws through the bracket here that came with your rack. This bracket's going to go on the back side of the cab and is going to be what receives the back side of your bolts. So if you just put your bolts all the way through, that registers them right where they need to be, and just check your holes and see that, yep, they line up good. There's just a little bit of play in there because nobody's perfect. So 7/16 inch holes are just a little bit bigger than your 3/8 inch bolts. Okay, we're almost ready to bolt our bracket up to the truck. We have our holes drilled, and we're going to grab, there was another piece included with your kit, and that's a little aluminum strip like this. And the purpose of this piece is going to be to mount this piece. Okay, so the job of this is basically we're going to have to fish this piece behind the bed of the truck, and so this is going to allow you to get back there. What this is made to do is bend. So you're going to bend this into an ideal position so that when you put it back here, it pushes it nice and flat up against the cab of your truck. And then you can hand screw your bolts in, and I'll show you how that works. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get this part. All the bolts are removed. Grab the aluminum bendy piece here and pull the adhesive backing off of the end of it. Okay. This piece here has, you'll notice on the back side there are two bolts. On the other side it's flat. The flat side is going to go up against the inside of your bed. So the adhesive strip will be stuck onto the side where the bolts are sticking, or the nuts are sticking out here. So this is the side. We'll just go ahead and stick that on there. And it doesn't have to be, super crazy on there. You just want to get it on there good enough that it holds it in place. And one thing, if it falls, then you're just going to have to go out and grab it and stick it back on, but try to get it to stay on there pretty good. If for some reason you can't keep it on there, maybe you can run some tape over the back of it to make it a little bit stronger, but I think this should be enough to hold it in place for you, and I'll show you how to make that work. So obviously if I put it behind right now, it's too far back there. So just looking at my bed, it looks like I'm going to need to come in just a little bit. So I'm going to bend it once like that for my truck bed to get it up in here, and then bend once again. And you're probably going to just have to do a little bit of experimenting with it. I actually bent that the wrong way. Go this way and that way. And this doesn't have to be done beautifully, just needs to get done. And so now I can put it back there and get a sense. It looks like I got it pretty good first try. Lucky me. Okay, now we've got the bracket in on the other side. It's between the cab and the bed, and I've fished it down in with the aluminum bend strip, and you can see that the bolt is right there lined up with the hole. So what you want to do is just take one of your bolts, and we're going to just go ahead and put it straight in here just to get the bracket held into position. And you want to find that hole, and it's probably not going to be perfectly flat, so you're going to want to move that around until you can finger thread that in there, because you don't want to cross thread the bolt. So if it's not going in there smooth, don't force it with the wrench. Make sure that you can put it in there with your fingers. If you suspect that maybe the nut is just got something on it and it's not letting it go with your fingers, pull it back out and test it outside of, having it in this position. Just test it outside and see if you can put it in and out with your fingers. If you can, you should be able to do it in here as well. All right, so now that I've got that, I'm actually going to go ahead and just slightly tighten that down. And that's going to kind of hold this in position for me so that I can show you the next step. Okay, so if at this point the other side here, you feel like it's not quite lined up, you can take a tool and just kind of, get it lined up. And then I would suggest check it with a bolt. See if you can kind of get it lined up. Make sure before you put the bracket up to it that you're perfectly lined up. In this case, it's not quite lined up still. So let's work on that just a little bit more. Actually not still quite lined up, so I'm going to go ahead and grab another tool, push it through there, line that up, and then tighten this down a little bit more, because I think that it might just be not tight enough and it's falling down. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and try again. Yeah, now I've got it lined up. Okay, let me go ahead and make sure that that bolt's going in there nice. Okay. Alright, looking good. So what I'm going to go ahead and do now, I'm going to take my bracket now, and I've chosen to go ahead and put my lock, I'm going to make it facing towards the driver's side of the cab. So I'm going to put the square side facing into the middle. I'm going to take my bolt, make sure and put my lock washer on it, and just go ahead and thread in the bracket in this position here. Get it started by hand, and then finish it with my tool here. Okay, and again, you want to kind of snug it up just a little bit. Not real tight, but just a little bit, and then we're going to come over and we're going to pull this bolt back out. Okay, and looks like as I pull this bolt out, it loosened up this one, so I'm going to go ahead and tighten it down just a little bit again. And probably as I go to lift this up, it's going to cause the bracket inside to want to lift up as well. So we'll see how we can keep that from becoming a problem. Nope, it's not lifting up. In my case, it's staying in position. So I'm going to go ahead and line those two up. Oh, don't forget to put your washer back on there. Put your lock washer on. Okay, I'm going to walk you through the procedure to mount the bracket that goes between the cab and the truck bed behind the truck bed. So first we're going to take one of our bolts and just go ahead and remove the washer off of it. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and take this part and we're going to fish it between. Now I've already pre-curved my part so that it will come up against those holes as nicely as I can. You want to try to get it so that when you push it back in there, it's going to be as flush, flat as you can to the hole. But it's not necessary for it to be perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and fish it back in there. Okay, when you go to put the bolts into the hole, make sure, finger tension, you want to start feeling that going in. You don't want to fight it. If you start fighting it and you start using a tool to screw that in, you might be cross-threading the bolt. So you don't want to damage your part. So make sure that you can finger tighten it. If you think maybe there's something on the bolt that's not allowing it to finger tighten, just pull it back out. In fact, we'll go ahead and do that right now. I would suggest that you pull it back out and just go ahead and try it in front of the cab. Yep, no problem here. Check the other hole. No problem there. And they do need to be fairly aligned, so it takes a second to, try a few times until you get it right, until you feel it go in with your fingers. If it does feel like it's jammed a little bit, you can go ahead and get it started and then use your tool to kind of break a little piece of dirt or whatever might have gotten in the way. Anyway, we're going to go ahead and put it in there again, now that we've got it fitting well. And hand thread that side there. Okay, it's going in no problem. I'm going to go ahead and tighten that down just a little bit. Okay. Now, before I snug that up, I want to look on the other side here and make sure that this hole is aligned as well. Make sure you got that hole aligned because you're going to need that next. Okay. And then I'm just going to snug that up just a little bit, just enough to kind of hold this side into position. Okay, and then use your strip to move it around a little bit, and that looks pretty good. Now just check it and see if it's aligned. Yep, looking good. Okay, so now make sure you have your lock washer on this bolt. We're going to go ahead and put the bracket on. When we go to put the bracket on, we want to make sure and pick which way we want the bracket. There's a decision that you have to make. One side has the square hole, the other side has the round. The round hole is the side you're going to be able to put your lock on if you want to lock this into your truck. So I'm going to go ahead and put the lock side facing the outside of the truck on my truck. So you could also face it towards the middle of the truck if you would like. Go ahead and put your bolt through, lock washer goes right there, and line it up with the hole and hand thread it in. Once it gets started, you can go ahead and tighten it up with the bolt. Okay. Now you don't want it too tight. You just want it, somewhat snug in there. If you get it too tight, when you go to rotate it into position, it could push the bracket out of the way, and you don't really want that moving too much. We're going to go ahead and pull this bolt out now. Kind of do it gently. Feels like I might be able to tighten that down just a little bit more. There we go. Okay. Now it looks like my position is still good. Get this bracket lined up. If it looks like your bolt hole or your nut on the backside moved a little bit, then you can use your strip to kind of move it around a little bit. You could also take a tool and push it through and just get everything back into alignment with that. Okay, now you're going to want to go ahead and put your washer back on your bolt and put this bolt in. All right. Now I can go ahead and tighten it up. that snugged up nice and tight, and then take your strip off and you have your bracket installed. We're going to go ahead and install the rack into the bracket now. Bring your rack up to the bracket, make sure you have your end pieces inside the tube, and then you're going to just simply put it in between, just like so. Find the hole, bring it across, and there might be a little bit of fishing around, and just make sure you get it all the way through the other side, and that this side is mounted all the way through. There's a square hole that meets the square hole of the bolt. Make sure those two are seated into each other. It's okay to just put the nut right onto the bolt and secure the rack down that way without putting the lock housing on the top of it, as long as it's not something that you are concerned about. If you would like to have the lock housing and implement a lock through this mechanism, that will make it so that somebody can't easily steal this out of your truck. Basically what happens is this is going to go over the top of the nut, and once you put a lock through here, there's no way to get a ratchet inside there to remove the bolt, and you can't access the bolts that are holding it to the cab because there's no space in there to get a hex wrench in there. So it's actually a pretty effective lock system. If that's not something that you have a socket handy that you can put that together, you can still get going by just putting the bolt on with a wrench. Otherwise, go ahead and assemble it with a socket wrench, and I will show you how that works right now. To install your locking housing over the top of the bolt, you're going to need to put your bolt down into the locking housing. There's a nylon nylock washer or fitting that's inside your nut. You don't want that side facing the bottom of your housing. You want the non-nylock side facing the bottom of your housing. So we're going to put that in there this way. Okay, and once it's in there, you might have to kind of flip it around, get it back into the right position. Go ahead and take it and make sure that you can see that you can align it with your finger. And then we're just going to take that, keep your finger in there to hold it up against it. We're going to push it up against the bolt. That's going to push the bolt out on the other side and allowing you to spin it. You're going to spin it until it threads into the nut. And then once you get it threaded into the nut a little bit, you'll feel it stop against the nylock fitting, and you'll just pull it until the square on the opposite side locks into the square, and then you're ready to tighten it with your ratchet. So let's grab our ratchet. You don't want to keep hand pressure on this side so that it doesn't keep pushing it out, because if it pushes it out, you'll have no resistance. And let's go ahead and tighten it down. Okay. Now don't get too crazy tightening it down because you don't want to break anything. It just needs to be snug. So you don't need to put it in there so tight that you're starting to crush the plastic inserts and everything like that. Just get it to where everything's snugged up, feel the rack. If everything feels solid, you're good to go. So you want it just tight enough that the rack can move freely but isn't shaking all around inside the mount. So it should be snug in the mount but easily come up and down when you lift it with your hand. It's important for you to know that when you go to close your bike rack over your wheel, that it is possible to put way too much tension on the system. If you over tension the system will break. This is designed not to crush down on your wheel and clamp it with extreme strength. More, it just locks over the top of your wheel and keeps everything secure with a gentle pressure. So you don't really want to be seeing your tire crushing under the pressure of all of the mechanism. I'll show you what that looks like and get into the details of how to close this over your wheel. When you install your bike into the single mount or in any of the bike racks that we sell, you're going to want to realize that the back end might lift up 2 to 3 inches up off the bed. That's okay and that's normal. It depends on how high you mount the rack. The higher you mount your rack, like if you mount it at about 19 inches and you're using a 29er, it might just barely lift off the bed. If you're using a 26 inch or putting a 26 inch wheel into the rack, it probably won't lift off the bed at all. It just depends on the tire size. But the rack is secured to the truck through the front head unit here. So in this case, it's locked in and it's fine, but it is lifted off the bed. this mount is set at about 17 inches. So that gives you an idea of what that does. Now what you need to know is that when you clamp your bike into your truck, so you're going to pull your bike out, and then when you go to put it back into the truck, when you go to clamp it in, it might not be perfectly straight. So you want to give it a little bit of a shake, settle it out, make sure it's sitting in each of the V points on the rack, and then you're good to go. Once you have it adjusted, it should go into its position every time. If the tire is really crooked and you're not really, paying attention, you just want to just jam it in there real quick, it's not going to clamp very well. So you're going to need to hold it just a little bit straight, and then you can go ahead and clamp it in. And then, like I said, give it a little shake. It'll settle out the wheel, and make sure that you check your clamp, that it feels like it's got some tension on it. After your bikes are mounted into your pickup, you'll want to shut your tailgate. If you have a short bed pickup, like in the case of this one, use a bed extender. This particular bed extender works great. There's a lot of different types of bed extenders on the market that can help secure your cargo.